camera cannot reorient once I set the live stream location. Hey everybody, it's Jack Devine, and thank you for tuning in if you're here. Today we're going to talk about a training technique that I use basically to get my self in shape. I've used it for years, and it's something that a lot of people don't do enough of, if you ask me. And it's utilizing drones to practice, right? So I'm gonna go and pick a sound that I like to use for this kind of thing. And I find this technique works best if you're using, sorry for this, I'm bending over here, something that has a little bit more sustain. So if you've got the ability to add overdrive to your sound, my suggestion is you do that. All right? So today we're gonna, what did I do here? I was playing open G last night, that's right. So, there we go. So what I want you to do is set up a drone, okay? And this is a technique that will help us right here. If we just play the 1 and the 5 of, say, this D chord. Okay, just like that. And then get a looper together. Well, we're just gonna go 1, 2, hopefully it's in time. Pretty good. Now, what I want you to do is take your overdriven. This is weird. This is weird. I'm not sure whether or not are we live or not? I keep getting mixed signals. Are we live or not? I keep getting mixed signals. I got, I want to see now. I'm going to actually, somebody said, hey, what you should do is you should go and see you can see the questions here. Okay, so it looks like this is working. All right, turn it down. I have bad internet connection down here in my studio, so I guess what it did is had some technical difficulties. Yes, I did, but it looks like it's back. That's great. Thank you so much, man. All right, so sorry about that. So brief interruption, but let's say we've got our loop set up. Okay, this is D5. Okay, that's D and A played together. Just 1, 2, 3, like that. 4, boom, boom. Now, what I want you to do is try to key in on playing the fundamental. All right, now close your eyes and realize where you are and experiment with something that you know you can get to, like the flat 7. Hey, how's it going? Okay, so now we're hearing like, that's our flat 7, and we got our eyes closed. This is important that we're not looking, we're listening. We're working on training our ear-hand coordination, not our hand-eye coordination. Now just key in on that sound and see if you can now come up to the 9. Okay, that's the 2. Now, very quickly, we're starting to craft a bit of a Mixolydian sound, right? You know, we've got that, right? Again, my eyes are closed through all of that playing, all right? Much easier when you do it on one string to see the connection between the pitches in terms of distance. When we start involving the adjacent strings, right, it's more familiar. We can rely, hey, that is right, Sunday, I know, right, this is welcome to church, my style of church anyway, welcome to the church of the perverted sinner. Anyway, So the idea of working on ear training, right? This is the connection that we don't get an awful lot of practice on when we approach practicing guitar. We're sitting there, we're always staring right at our hand, and we're going, right? Don't do that. Seriously, I mean, granted, my body is aligned this way, so my head's gonna probably be facing this way anyway, but I want you to really focus on that D mixolydian sound at first, and then try to implement it. Next move is to start trying to think about sliding over adjacent tones. So again, eyes closed. Eyes closed. You have to hear it and feel it, all right? Now, granted, when we're playing, and like, let's say we were doing like a recording session, yeah, you can use your other senses, but what we're trying to do is work on this thing, not this thing, okay? So listen to what I'm telling you. Try this sometime when you've got some time. It might take about 5 or 10 minutes, honestly, for your ear to start to dial into this technique. Okay, and then bending into the notes would be the next suggestion. So if we started here. Right now, once you recognize where you are within the mode, you can intuit. When I did that bend, I had my eyes shut, but I knew I was bending up to a note that had one note. The next note sequentially was just one semitone away. So, and I knew I could get there with just a little extra pressure with my hand. That's doing this, like, one string business. Now let's try to take it a little bit more, rather than horizontally, let's think vertically. This kind of idea. Okay, and like I said, don't be put off by the synthesizer, like octave. That's just so that the sound, it's like more of a sine wave. You're not hearing a spike and then a quick drop off it from the transient. I'm looking for something that's very compressed to practice this with, okay? And I want you to just think about playing, again, within this area against your drone, and try bending into every note. I don't tab things out, I know it would be, everybody always asks me to tab things out, and so I'm not sure what else I could do. I mean, I try to offer what I can to the community. The truth is, I don't use tab. I've never read tab. I haven't the foggiest idea how I would go about creating it. If somebody can point me in the direction of somebody who's prepared to transcribe the hours of content that I've put up on the internet without bankrupting me, I would actually entertain doing that for you guys. I would foot the bill for that and offer it as like maybe a side service or something like that, where people, but I mean, so far a few folks have actually been kind enough to transcribe and tab out some things like the ICO lesson and some other things, but not the Althea lesson that you mentioned there. So I'm sorry to tell you, no, the point of this channel isn't just to acquire some licks and be able to play some shapes on the instrument, which is a great starting point, but it's actually, that's just part of what being the musician that you can be is. And a lot of this is the connection between like what we're here to talk about today is the training of our ear and our hands to be in concert with one another. To connect the ear and your hand rather than your hand and your eye. You and I have probably spent thousands of hours playing catch or, dealing with stuff that we're seeing and grabbing with our hand. We do this all the time. But what we're not accustomed to doing is actually rendering what we hear in our mind, like our inner ear, all right, and making it come out of this inanimate object, wooden wire, with this silly meat hook. Okay, so let's try that loop again. And we're going to try to bend into adjacent scale tones. Now the weird part is that the tension is going to be different on every string and in different locations, so you have to really work on your ear training. That was flat. There we go. Away from me there. It started out pretty good. I was doing my phony George Harrison thing. Right? So playing melodies that you know and trying to make them come out, that's a great thing because we probably have a Rolodex of melodies already stored in our head. If you can make that happen, that's a really great starting point. Now, one of the things that people wanted to talk about over the last couple of times has been modes. And I view this practice that I'm doing right now as very interconnected with modes in that we're playing against this drone. And so if we can add a layer to our drone, we actually have the advantage. I'm not sure whether or not the Kemper's going to behave. Sometimes it doesn't want to do that for me. But let's assume we've got our drone going. Okay, and let's add a note that makes it something else, something other than just a 1 and a 5. Let's add a Dorian 6th. Okay, so that would make the minor 3 and the 6th, like that. So all we need to do is overdub this, and it's as predicted. The Kemper has shit the bed. So what we want to do is try to figure out a way to imply that. Okay, that tritone over top of this triad is the sound of the Dorian sound. So let's try to get that in our head since I can't put it in a loop. Here, let's see if I can add it. There's some. Trying all this with my eyes closed, all right? The trick is to be blindfolded. I'll often, look, I'm not espousing the use of inebriants or anything like that, but at the end of the day, sometimes I'm tired and maybe I'll pour myself a little cocktail or something like that, get relaxed, come down here and I'll turn out the lights and I will literally just set this up and go for an hour or two working on internalizing pitch and the physical distance on the board and within the vertical structure of this, and I'll set up a loop that has a little bit more information maybe in it than just the 1 and the 5, and implement like work on my diminished ideas, work on my augmented ideas, work on all these things just against one static, not like a not moving chord. That is probably the single greatest error that most of my students try to make is, not try to make, that they do make when they try to practice, is that they involve too many moving parts. And so it makes it hard for them to key in on what element they're really practicing on. So one of the best things about drone-based practice is it doesn't afford you any distractions. And even more so when you remove the lights and everything like that, and you just work on literally the most important thing that we have is these things. If we don't use these, we're in real trouble. All right, so that's the end of like my sermon. But what I would like, I'm totally open up the floor to questions, and not necessarily pertaining to that. And this week, my house was cluttered with beautiful activity and awesome musicians who were coming from near and far in the New York area to play with me. I had a great rehearsal and a visit from a friend and bandmate last night, and did some good work on some tunes, which was super fun. And let's think, maybe I can share with you some of the more meaningful developments that took place there, which were great. Let's see about that. We'll go to here, maybe one more. Yeah. So here we go. Let's talk about He's Gone. All right, I'm assuming that there's some Grateful Dead folks out there. So the primary groove that we focus on in He's Gone is the Garcia line, this little thing, this little... Right? Without that A in. Don't go, that's bad. All right, that's bad daddy. All right, so let's look at what happens when we put that down into a loop. All right, you can tell by now, loops are an important part of practicing when you're by yourself. If you don't have somebody to practice with, or something to practice with, the looper is your best, as one of your best allies, provided of course you're in time. Then you might need a metronome. Okay, so. Let's see if that's in time. A little flumpy there on the okay, there's a bit of a flam there. Let's get rid of that. Okay, so don't let that happen to you. Let's see if I can get a smooth one. All right, and do it. I'll do it here. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, that's better. All right, so now we've established the Garcia part. This is the what I'm calling the Bobby part. All right, so that's boom, bum, bum, ba, bum. Something like that. I'm taking the F sharp and the A and sliding up this little dyad. So if we look at dyads within E, right? That's what I'm adding. So. And then now I'm adding that little accent. So one of the spots that Bob Weir likes to occupy within the measure, okay, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, whatever however you want to break it up, 1, dun, he likes to come in on that 2, okay, so that sounds like this, that, right, that little space there. things that this little interlocking guitar part shows is how important this listening thing that I'm talking about is. Don't play what your other guitar player is playing unless that's the effect you're going for. And oftentimes the idea isn't to occupy the same note at the same time as the player. It's kind of like singing in harmony, right? You rarely want to double your singing partner. So think about where there are pockets, and that can be difficult in a band where you're improvising, or at least the MO of the group is one of exploration, right? We've got to learn to really hone in on the listening skills, all right? So when we hear what somebody's doing, presuming they're playing it more than once, we really need to figure out where somebody is and also where they aren't within the measure, okay? So 1, 2, so that's on 1, so we don't get the 1. We can't play the 1 as the Bobby guy, 1. Okay, so where's the next accent on the Garcia? 1. That seems like 3, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. 1, 2, 3. So we don't want to be on 1 and 3. So like 2 and 4 maybe, right? So there we go. Okay, so I'm there on those 2 hits I'm playing. But what am I hitting though? He's hitting and I'm going, I'm not playing any of the notes that the Garcia part is playing. I'm actually playing, kind of implying a 5 cadence. So 1, 5, 1, 1, 5. That's why I'm coming back here. I'm implying that's what's happening. Really fun little thing to kind of look at if you dissect the separation of Jer and Bob, you can really look at how they interacted. Another, obviously, some of the more classic ones are things like what's happening in playing in the band, or what is it, China Cat or something like that. China Cat's particularly busy on the Bobby side of things. That's kind of an interesting thing. So anyway, that's kind of another one is the Bob part in Scarlet interacting with what's on the recorded version, where Garcia is doing some really interesting stuff where he's basically just playing on the 4. If I'm not, he's basically waiting a long time in the bar. If you examine where these people come in on these landmark recordings, it's pretty clear that they're either musically, endowed with gifts that we don't have, or they've spent a lot of time listening, okay? And I think it's a little of both, to be honest. I was obviously deeply impressed by Jerry's ability to listen to what's going on, but more so Bobby's. I think Bobby is he's a treasure in that he's still around, so we have to be happy to see him in his in the light of this eminence grise of the jam band music stuff. So he's an incredible cat. And when you look at the stuff that he contributed with the guitar playing, he really had an uphill battle with a bassist as busy as Phil and as reluctant to conform to typical bass standards, and with the guitarist as mercurial as Garcia. It's shocking that Bob found a place within the band to where he could shine. Another great example of Bob's ability to find this little pockets is the landmark recording on Europe 72 of Tennessee Jed. He's really, really amazing on that. If you haven't checked out what Bob Weir's contribution to that is, he's almost subliminally present, and then he makes these beautiful little entrances. So he'll be doing these little over top of what you think is these kind of things, and then all of a sudden from out of nowhere these little things kind of chirp up right through the mix, and it's just so those little upbeat accents, again usually on the beat like that too. All right, that's also what he's doing in Scarlet. 1, 2, dum ba dum ba dun da dun da dum da bum ba da da ba bum ba dum da ba dum, without it making it sound like a reggae thing or a skank, right? He's one of the few rock guitar players that clearly had this delayed, like, oh, I'm gonna zig where the other guy is zagging, and he's awesome at it. It's kind of a difficult thing to hear because he's often filtered out a lot of the low end so as to not compete with the other elements of the band, and he's playing in these places where we don't usually look for guitar, right? Usually we're thinking about like Scarlet as being that. But if we try to build a little Scarlet loop, we should think about that and be like, now granted, I don't know if my board is, my Kemper's been misbehaving, but. Let's see if we can build the bob part. That is just straight up genius, those descending octaves. Is, I mean, we hear that, but do we register what it took to actually hear that in our mind, or his mind rather? That is truly dope. All right, so end of discussion on Bob Weir's Rhythm Genius and how to interpret the options you've got based on your ear training, which you've got to work on. I'm assuming everybody out there is a little sick and tired of me talking about how important metronomes are. But if you don't practice with your metronome, you're not practicing, you're playing guitar. And that's a great thing to do. I love playing guitar too, but if you don't practice with your metronome, the rhythmic insecurities in your playing are gonna carry through all the way. You're never gonna iron them out if you don't break out a metronome and actually break down timing. Timing is the single greatest foe for most of my students. If I was to, people do ask me, what's the one thing that every one of your students needs to work on? And it's basically down to 2 disciplines. One, timing, and the second is kind of this need to develop alternate picking strength. So many of my students, I guess they were self-taught, or at least for many years, they spent a lot of time on their own trying to crack this nut. And the problem is that they've developed a few boo-boos along the way. Something like they would look at playing like the E-mixolydian sound that I just conjured there, right? They would be like, they start to get choppy with their right hand. And they feel like, oh, I've got this together. I can play, right? But then something happens where their mind drifts for a second, or they try to listen, and the infrastructure that they've built, right, can't handle playing in the groove when they try to when they mess with the beat a little bit, which is going to be part of it, improvising, right? They're going to end up tripping and falling, all right? Because downbeats get downstrokes is a huge, huge part of playing in the pocket. If you think that you're actually doing strict alternate picking, that's a misnomer. This term alternate picking, hey, sir, can you up the gain on my voice a tad? No, but what I can do is bring the microphone a little closer, if that works. Hi, as you can tell, I'm probably struggling a little bit. Any better? All right, I'll try to shout a little bit more. Let me wet my whistle here and see if I can. Is that? Oh, it's better. Okay, great. All right, so let's talk about like how do we? No problem is let me adjust the angle there. Yep, there we go. Sorry, we're dealing with just an iPhone here, folks. So the idea is that these people are sitting here approaching me and saying, hey, I'm having trouble. And then the first thing I see is like that, right? When it should be, right? Now, granted, there's some rotational stuff that they have to learn. They have to learn that when they, after a downstroke, there's an upstroke. Oh, thank you very much. I do appreciate that, Scotty. Thanks, man. So, and thank you very much for tuning in, everybody. So, one of the things that I want people to understand is if you're not alternate picking at a cellular level with the understanding of downbeats, get these downstrokes, and upbeats, get the upstrokes, you're going to end up, even if you alternate pick, pardon me, you're going to end up having problems. What we want to do is identify where those like emphatic downbeat moments take place and make sure that our right hand is aligned with them, right? So if there's time to take another downstroke, right, and the next stroke, the next sound you want to make is concurrent with a downbeat, by all means, do not feel the need to do an upstroke because the last stroke you did, it's not like dogmatic. We don't have to go down, up, regardless. It's not draconian, right? If I do it down, I must do an up. That's only if we're playing consecutive along the graph of 16th notes. So 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a, right? That's how we want to get that drilled in. But if we were to eliminate some of those notes, there's a possibility that we would go down, 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 right? Like that. If we're looking at, let's look at 1, 2, 3, 4. Then we would have 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E. So you see how the 2, the 3, and the 4 are still on downstrokes. If I'm playing 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4 and a 1E and a 2E and a 3 and a 4 and a 1, and I still didn't go 1. You can, but that's part of like the confusion within a lot of the student is they think, oh, I did a downstroke, therefore the next thing has to be an upstroke. Not necessarily. If there's enough time between your downstroke and the next stroke you intend on playing, and that next note happens to be on one of the prevailing downbeats, you're better off coming out and doing another downstroke. That way you stay in the pocket, because the more times you hit upstrokes on downbeats, the more confused the body becomes. There's like a kinetic thing that happens where you're like going up at the time when your body is feeling like it should be coming down. And so don't get that confused. And the best way to do that at a cellular level is to start pounding 16th notes into your head. So if you don't know how to do something as stupid as playing Eye of the Tiger, or what is that, Edge of 17, those are... right? Something as silly as that, I hate that song. I hate that song. I don't like the word hate. That song drives me bonkers. That said, it is a good lesson for getting your 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E, that driving rhythm and kind of slavish devotion to downbeats get downstrokes, upbeats get upstrokes. It's a very, very important thing to have just kind of instilled in. If we were going to say that the right hand or picking hand had a brain, we want it to be in the limbic part of the brain, like the reflexive part, the part that's like, it's just like breathing or walking. We don't even think about it. We don't factor it in. That's what makes successful picking hard to teach, is by the time somebody's gotten to the point where they're doing it successfully, it's been embedded so deeply in their body's reflexes that they can't really tell people how to attain that fluency. All right, but I'm telling you the way to get it, that for me was definitely utilizing. So get yourself, if you need to get into character, put on a yellow, headband and some leg warmers and do your Rocky. All right, and do your Eye of the Tiger riff, okay? But don't worry about the chords, just... Then you want to maybe go to the exercise that I like to talk about, which my boy Charlie taught me. playing 16th notes in groups of 4 across the string. So 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1. Now, this is purely to coordinate, okay? We can then shift to these fingers if we want to make sure we're working. The left hand is not really what this exercise is about. It's about getting your right hand used to this reality. Down, up and over, and under the A string. What? Then. All right, and this is something that we talk about a lot in the guitar community, is pick slanting and how it affects our ability to fluidly move to switch strings here, okay? We want fluidity. We want to round off some of these corners, right? We don't want it to go down, up, down, and be trapped here, then come out, down, in, and then do that upstroke on the A string. We want to go down, up, down, past the A string, and come back up at an inverted angle, like that. All right, now one of the things that can make this easier is not starting in a very profoundly downward angle, then having to rotate even further. You start like in a neutral position with your right hand, down, up, down. You can see how I come out a little bit to get under it. All right. The other way to do it is to add a slur. So while you're hammering on with the ring finger, you're out and under, and you can take your time. It's pretty nice. Okay. I don't really sense too great a change between those things, but it's hard for me to think about so much. So I tend to default to just alternate picking. But look, we're doing an outside string change here. Outside, inside, outside, outside. So outside on the E and the A string. Now the cool thing about this exercise is that as we learn 3 notes per string, we shift to these 3 to make sure these three fingers are getting a workout. Now we've got our hand nicely coordinated. We've learned how to play 3s across the string set, and that's our biggest thing, is switching back and forth between this and this. Now we can actually implement some meaningful melody. Okay, we can play. Play the major scale and practice any and all of its modes up through all those things. And now we're actually cooking with gas. We've got our right hand under control, the left hand learning some modes, and now we can get on with the business of making music, now that we have a fundamental understanding of timing and everything like that. And that's a long spiel to say, like, work with a metronome, get your alternate picking together. Otherwise, you know, if you're going to be playing like this, I mean, that takes so much effort. The time it takes for you to go down, down. Well, you had to come up to play that second downstroke anyway. You might as well just hit the string on your way back, as opposed to. This is so much more effort. But what we need to learn is one foot in front of the other, like down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. Right, left, right, left, right, left, right, or right, left, right, however you want to, you know. Imagine hopping everywhere you went. It would take you forever. And try getting sexy on the dance floor with somebody hopping instead of dancing back and forth, right? Music is connected to rhythm, and it's really hard to hop up and down in rhythm. It's not exactly the coolest look. Well, similarly, it sounds funky when people are going. We don't want that choppy sound. We want it. Okay, we want it nice and fluid. So those are kind of the watchwords of my musical upbringing, is alternate picking, alternate picking, alternate picking, alternate picking. You got to get that together. After that happens, you can actually bend the rules a little bit and realize that there are moments in time where it makes sense to go. That was just a little sweep. As opposed to, that's actually more work here than going. Like, there's no way to do. That's down, up, down, up. That's painful. Ugh. So very quiet out of the crew this morning. Anybody got anything on their mind? What are you struggling with? What are you thriving with? What's good? What's bad? What's happening? Talk to Daddy. Not your daddy, but you know what it is. My kids are out of the house, so I thought I would come down here to the studio and do a little playing, drink a coffee, and see if anybody was online and wanted to rap. All right, well, in the meantime, maybe I'll just jam a little bit. Try that again. Myself. There's colossal wipeouts on that first round through though. Woo! So I don't know what was happening, but definitely wasn't focused. I was trying to hear, but not doing it. So be prepared to fail. Failure is definitely an option. Just hope that shit doesn't happen when you're on stage. Anyway, I guess I'm kind of on a stage though. At some point, you got to start to realize like, oh, here I am broadcasting out into the infinite. But anyway, that was Broke Down Palace. It was a very fun song to play, but it is challenging for some guitar players because it's out of F and B flat and utilizes some positions of the neck that we don't often use. There is this one little idea that I use pretty consistently in there, which is to play the melody. Pardon me. And this other idea that I like a lot, which is this. this big buildup that happens in there. So let's just say we've got our melody kind of sussed out. Right here we would have really right up my alley in terms of my hot photos here. Oh my God, somebody is trying to send me sexy pictures. I don't really want to see that. No, thank you. All right, so how can YouTube like even tolerate things that are like that? It's really gross. All right, so that little move, right? We're starting from the flat 3 of our F chord that we're about to play into. Okay, so we're gonna go flat 3, 3. When developing a practice plan for Jerry style lead, what are the most important techniques? I think of things like dominant 7th arpeggios, getting through them in shapes. Okay, so Tommy, hey, thank you for taking the time to ask. And being brave enough to offer your voice to this conversation. I like that. A lot of people don't want to get involved. Let's take a look at the things that I would outline, okay? I don't think your suggestions are all great and all important, but there are other things that are equally as important. So I would say you have to form a multi-pronged approach. One is making sure that you've got your right hand picking discipline together. Pardon me. All right, so if you've got this kind of bluegrass picking technique that Garcia and I am talking about, this kind of idea that like where the right hand does the downbeats get downstrokes, upbeats get upstrokes, not necessarily just, but even if there's a break. So I didn't go down, up, down, up. I didn't do that. I went 1. Actually, I guess I did do an upstroke there. So I'm definitely just really reliant on my right hand to guide me through because of all the diggy training that happened. Super important to get because you can't think about music. You have to just feel it. All right, so what we're doing is drumming these things into our muscle memory to such an extent that we're relying on it. So if you put bad information into your hand's muscle memory, of course you basically have been practicing wrong, and you don't want to do that. So right hand etiquette, or whatever you want to call it, you've got to get your right hand's discipline together. Otherwise, you're fighting an uphill battle the whole way. Right? And this is the problem, that most people want to focus on the left hand first, and that's just not the right thing to do. And if you want to understand Garcia a little bit better, take it back a step before he was a guitar player and think about the fact that he was playing 5-string banjo, and the overarching discipline that's put into the banjo student is actually they practice to an open chord. They practice to an open G chord to get these rolls. It's not that big a stretch for you as a guitar player to see doing it with a flat pick. And now we've got some discipline, kind of pounded in there. 1 and 2 and 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. That's 6 and 2 makes 8. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. So simple exercises like that, or the 16th note 3-note per string thing. That's a great starting point, all right, for the right hand. Once you've got the right hand off the table, then we're prepared to actually kind of backfill, all right? And what a lot of people fail to recognize is just like those banjo things, there's only so many notes that we can fit in the bar. So once we have our right hand squared away, we know what the answers can be and can't be. We can't put, there isn't room for more than a certain number of notes. So that kind of eliminates lots of possibilities, which is a good thing because goodness knows there's enough. So then we can start thinking about what do we want to play with our left hand, and then we can think about what patterns and sounds are kind of organic and germane to those patterns, okay? And from those, then we start the knowledge, accessing the knowledge of scales, shapes, licks, arpeggios, and stuff like that. So my first and best attack usually towards getting students up and running is right hand studies. But once that's accomplished, or at least on the back burner and they're developing those skills, we can shift to the more intriguing side of choosing which notes we play. And I tend to start with simpler scales like the pentatonic stuff, the 5-note scales. And so let's say we're looking at, let's do something out of C, okay? So if we start with a simple loop of something like, now I would want, just to work on playing over one chord, right? And at that point, we're looking at major pentatonic, and then we're adding a major component, but it's actually a minor third. So, like that. I wish I knew which lick you're talking about, because I seriously, all that stuff is just pounded into my skull at this point. I have no idea, burlap, what you're hinting at. But the cool thing is, all that's in there, and I'll never be able to access it again other than, you know, just for fun. You know, it might happen again, just the same way the same combinations or turn of phrase that we use when we are in conversation, right? We never say the same thing twice exactly. So scope this out. If we were playing root 6, 5, 3, 2, 1. Just add this little connective dot between the second and the third degree of our C chord. And on the way up, we use it to get into the third. And on the way back, we use it to get into the second. That. Flat 3 into 3, root 6, 5, root. The major pentatonic with that flat 3 as the underpinning of your playing over top of major chords, super important. Then we can augment that and literally just make the jump from playing a 5-note scale with this third in it to adding some of the color tones that are going to drive it's kind of the frosting on top of the cake. That's a good way to look at it, okay, Tommy? So if you look at this chord, what am I playing over? That's a pure major triad. I could play over top of that. That isn't the sound I'm trying to impart, though. I'm trying more for this with this, occasionally using the flat 7 and the 4. So basically, I'm using a kind of a major pentatonic with a flat 3 and occasionally hinting at some of the notes from the Mixolydian scale to get to the Garcia sound. I don't think it's wise to just call it C Mixolydian because that doesn't seem to really give enough importance to the scale tones that really are at the heart of the sound that Garcia likes, and that's using the sixth. Okay, all right. Now, granted, the distinguishing note within the Mixolydian sound is the fact that it's the major scale with a flattened seventh. So that flattened seventh is kind of the hero of the Mixolydian scale to my ear, where when you frame it in the terms of the Mixolydian, the major pentatonic with the flat three. You end up with more of that ragtimey New Orleans sound, this kind of. Now I just added that in. Finally got to the flat seven, all right? But he's an ancillary player, not the majority stockholder in the mode that we're playing, right? When you think about it like it's Mixolydian, then you end up with more of that. Then at that point, my mind is thinking hammering that flat seven a lot more. Even though you have access to the six, like my brain has taught me, like that, some diminished chord tones. I'm not really. If I did, that was an accident, man. I'm not hearing any diminished sounds over that. But you can get crafty with using diminished stuff. It's easier to impart the diminished over a Dorian sound. So now that we've got like the understanding of the major chord approach to the Garcia sound, that was over a C major. Let's do it over a C minor groove. All right, and we gotta have some understanding about how to get around over a minor sound. So that would be. So now we're in C minor, Dorian in particular. Is wrong. Is right. Top of this Dorian sound, we do have the opportunity because of that note to actually get some diminished colors in there. Okay, and this is going to get heady for a second, but let's look at our minor scale. Okay, that's our natural sixth, and that's the note that makes this. Just the same way the flat seven is what gives the Mixolydian its color. This minor third, major sixth, and nine. That's what kind of drives this to be the winning sound here. Okay, what's going on? Why am I guess I'm okay. So if we've got this sound, when you hear that, right now we've got all those notes work over top of our groove. But when we examine that, in addition to being the extensions of a C Dorian sound, we also look at that looks an awful lot like an F7 chord. Okay, which it is. And that's super important to understand why people then therefore are playing. And that's why you can play Dorian over both those chords. So if you play C Dorian over F7, it sounds dynamite, okay? And if you play it over C minor, you better be playing over a C minor 7 with a 6 in there. Okay. That's why it's in this octave and this octave it sounds dynamite, right? So, but what else does that look like? Let's look at this. There's that F7 chord. Sorry. Right. If we see that these four notes, if that as its root, all right, forms an F7 chord. Watch what happens if we just raise the root up one tone. Now we have a fully diminished chord. F sharp diminished chord is, yeah, you definitely have to get over the, yeah, you definitely, this is super important. But, so check it out. If this is F7, F sharp diminished is F7 with just a flat 2, right? That's the 2 of F. So it's just, so if we displace this octave, all right, into our F7 chord and make it an extension rather than the root, we get this sound. Okay? And more importantly, its arpeggios start to sound very cool. Right? Right. Now we're expecting to hear that F sharp at the bottom, right? That's fully diminished. But over top of the F7 groove, okay, or a C minor Dorian sound, we could actually play F sharp diminished sounds over top of C Dorian. And watch, the sound's going to sound a little funky at first, but you'll get used to it. To see how I was utilizing some of the Dorian sound at the same time as using some of the diminished sounds. Okay. So for a second, you flash into that diminished sound, and then bring it back to it. Okay, so for a second there, you can start to access the diminished sound over top of either dominant chords or Dorian grooves. Okay, so that ability for the diminished to kind of shapeshift into other music is very cool. All right, but by and large, over top of a minor 6 or just a minor 7 jam, think Dorian, and you'll be in the money. Okay. Players forever. Funk. Fire. Anyway, having some fun. So, I don't know whether or not that answered your questions regarding how to get that. So, diminished in Dorian over, no, never over the, no, definitely, over minor 7 or minor 6. So that groove that I was playing right there, we could modify it a little bit, and sorry if I was unclear, but I didn't think I was. But if we did minor 7 to minor 6, so what are we doing with that B flat note? We're going from the 7, flat 7, to the 6. But another way we could look at that second chord, that minor 6th chord, is like an inversion of an F9 chord. See, if this is F9, then we can put the 5 in the base of F, and it still is an F chord. So we could, in theory, say this is going, like, if we were, let's say we're the bass player, we could determine whether or not the progression of the band that we're playing in would be like a C drone, or if it was going to 1 to 4. Okay, so that minor 6th chord is easily subbed for the 4/7, okay? Meaning the 4 chord with a flat 7 in it. So just the same way we were just soloing over C minor, if we were to do that groove, watch this, we can substitute just F7. Let's clear the loop and then F7, right? Now I'm going to play C Dorian over top of F7. How's it going? So, like that type of deal. All right, so that's what. Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate the exclamation points at the end of the dang, son. So that's one of these like modal like switcheroos that you can do, where you can basically be using your Dorian chops over top of dominant chords. Okay, that are So what are we doing? We're playing the C Dorian over F major, okay? It's been too long since your last live. Oh, the truth is I actually have been a busy beaver down here in the studio. I've been revamping and redecorating and cleaning and organizing and getting my life back on track. This summer I had a few setbacks in terms of music making. I had some health issues, and those are to some degree still ongoing. And then had some real issues with travel. Like I had amazing summer spent abroad with my family and everything. But that does wreak havoc on band life. That is upsetting to people when you disappear for 10 weeks or 12 weeks so that you can spend time with your children before they age out of the house, which is what we did. Took advantage of the opportunity to work remote, and but that did take me out of the band element. I hope you're all right. Yeah, I'm doing okay. I'm one day at a time, kind of piecing my ass back together. It's definitely tough. Sounded like I slipped into the thing. Oh yeah. Oh no. I don't think anybody. I didn't take it that way, Alex. I did not think you were complaining. All right, so I hope everybody can kind of see the interconnection between why playing C Dorian dials into the F7 sound, right? We're playing, there's the 7 of the F, and it's also the minor 3 of our C. Okay, and then this looks like a little F7 chord right here. That sounds cool over that, right? And it also sounds over that. So we're going C. So you can see a lot of that minor 5 of, if we were saying, oh, that's the 1, this is the 5 minor, that's a huge thing, because what does it do? It puts Mixolydian. So we're going to get a lot of that. We're going to, when the 5 is a minor chord, it sounds very Grateful Dead, Let my inspiration flow. Right? There it is. 1 chord, minor 5. It's everywhere in the Dead. It's everywhere. You can't get away from that. Okay? So when we're doing old man down, way down, down, down by the docks of the city. Right? Right? Or you've got right? Dark star crashes, and then back to this. Pouring its light into ashes. Okay, so deeply interconnected are the Dorian and the. We've got that Dorian sound over top of the 5 chord. Yeah, that's Dark Star. Yeah. So you got that, or you got a Mixolydian. Same mode. I mean, same notes, different modes of the D major scale. So, but when you see that 5 minor, that's kind of a key. I see. I'm playing at that's actually the 2 of the key, and that's the 5. So a lot of modal discussion here, and that can get really confusing because we're calling the same notes different things, and that can be confusing, and I understand that. I remember, like, my guitar teacher busted out the modes on me very early, and I came back to him like every week for weeks afterwards. I mean, weeks. I don't think I ever actually internalized it while I was studying with him, which was 4 or 5 years, twice a week. Okay, is that to say that any notes that are done? Yes, that is exactly what that means. So if let's say we set up let's look at an option for setting up a loop. Okay, so we're going to go from this A chord with the droning to a G chord, and then we're going to swap it out. Something like that. Of course, I know every note on the guitar. Yes. That has to happen ultimately, but there's only so many of them. There's not that many. Let's set up our little loop, and then we can have a discussion about how modal interchange can. No, I'm not going to ignore it. That's fine. Let's see if that loops nicely. All right, kind of cool. Now let's see if I can add an element to it. So now we have 2 elements happening: a bass line. Okay. Now, at first blush, it looks like this is going to be A major, right? Because it's a major chord. But that note's bad. That A flat, G sharp, no good. So quickly we'll. Okay. So now we know we're dealing with A major with a flat 7. So we call that a Mixolydian, right? Everybody knows this sound. Right? Okay, so a Mixolydian, whoop-de-doo, right? 7 notes, not that big a deal. But funny thing is, if we take those same 7 notes and bring them down 2 frets, we're playing G Lydian. Let's think about that. Now, I'm not going to anchor I'm going to think about the G Lydian ideas that I already have. So that's G major with a sharp 4. And if I stop playing G Lydian lines in the right place, then it can sound inside. If I stop on the 1, 3, and 5 of my supposed G Lydian mode, it's going to sound unresolved, like this. It's unresolved. But if I bring it to one of the 1, 3s, and 5s of a Mixolydian, it's going to sound dynamite. So if playing over the 5th mode, Mixolydian, sounds dynamite. Playing over the 4th mode, that's the G Lydian sound. Okay, that's that sound. Well, what's the pattern? What are we seeing? We're seeing the 5th, 5th, 4th. Then what's the 3rd? Oh, that's the F sharp. That's F sharp Phrygian, right? So if we went Mixolydian, Lydian, okay, then that would be Phrygian, Dorian, Ionian, if we go backwards through our church modes, right? So 5th, 4th, 3rd, 2nd, and 1st mode. So therefore, dark star, or this kind of phony dark star loop that I have set up, is actually at D major as the parent scale. Right? But again, we don't want to orient our lines to end on the 1, the 3, and the 5 of D. Maybe the 5, right? But really not, this doesn't sound resolved, and neither does that. But watch the notes. If I play, that's a D major 7 chord. Arpeggiated, but watch, if I take those same arpeggio notes and just end playing my arpeggio on the 1, 3, and 5 of its 5th mode, watch what it sounds like. Play. I'm so glad that you're picking that up, Alex. I think that's a huge thing to realize, that you can now access any of the chords. That's all right. And then finally of D major over top of a Mixolydian, okay? Because they're all diatonic to the thing that you're playing over, okay? Now, it's all about resolution. The notes are all constantly being reused, right? They're all just being jumbled up. D major is playing the D major scale from D to D. E Dorian is the 2nd mode of D major, and that just means playing D major scale tones from E to E. And then, consequently, we would go F sharp to F sharp, G to G, A to A, A to A. That's our 5th mode that we're talking now. All right? And so on and so forth. So watch, we could just play straight up B minor. I'm playing a B minor chord over top of this A major with a flat 7 sound. First clunker there, okay? So you can play an A, no, I'm not playing an A minor. No, you cannot play an A, that will sound bad. Here's A minor over Dark Star. Don't do that. You could play, sing, oh yeah, thanks man. So the idea is that we would be playing E minor over Dark Star. We could play E minor or B minor. So if you want to play if you want to play Aeolian, okay, that's the minor that we were just playing over the B chord. That's, okay, look, see how that's the D major scale? That's over the D, but if we put the B in the bass, right, that's what it's... See how those are the same notes? But by changing where we resolve, versus, right, it changes everything. Now if I play those same notes and put an E note in the bass, we're playing E Dorian. See, that's the minor third of the E. So it's E Dorian because it's got that minor third and that note right there, the C sharp. And that's what gives it that creepy sound. Now watch, that's over the A part, but when we go to over that E chord that happens really briefly, that's where it sounds all creepy. Changing the bass now from A, same extensions, now change it to E. All right, so now we've got two minor sounds that we could use: B minor or E. Okay, and last but not least, we could actually bring in C sharp minor 7 flat 5. The dreaded Locrian mode that everybody tells you is fucking useless. It's not useless. It's actually really helpful. Check out how Locrian sounds over top of this thing. Of course it sounds good. It's made up of the same goodies. It's like imagine somebody being so obsessed with like a caprese salad that they thought the only way it technically was a caprese is if it was mozzarella with tomato and basil in that order. But if you gave me and I mush up in my mouth any of those three ingredients in any order, it's going to taste like a caprese. So these are the same ingredients. We're just stacking them in a different sandwich, so to speak. So leading off of here, well, what's the difference? If I play that lick, now you're hungry. So just to be clear, the reason you just played Locrian is that, yes, of course, because basically I played D major starting from C sharp to C sharp. That's the arpeggio of the Locrian. Sorry. That's Locrian, right? But the way to think about it is not like the C sharp is the root of what you're playing over. Think of it like, oh, I'm just playing an arpeggio. Exactly. All the modes are still all basically D major, 100% the right thing. However, you need to make sure that you're thinking about the root of the chord that you're playing over. It's third major or minor, and it's fifth. Okay? So here we're actually working with a diminished fifth. Okay, but I'm not sitting there thinking I'm playing over this chord. That chord. I'm not thinking of that as the home chord. I'm thinking about it as starting from the third of the A that I'm playing over. 3, 5, flat 7, 9, third, 5, flat 7, 9. as opposed to root, minor third, flat 5, 7, root, minor third, flat 5, right? I'm not thinking about it relative to the C sharp. I'm thinking about it still superimposing this shape over this low A note. B minor arpeggios right now. D major right now. As long as I don't end on the D, it sounds resolved, right? See, I ended on that E, which is part of the A chord. That's its fifth, and it sounded dope. But as if I end on the D, unresolved. Same idea? That is how Los Modos do their thing. And they're pretty amazing because you realize, holy shit, I can recycle all of my F sharp Phrygian stuff over top of D major or over top of E minor or over top of G Mixolydian or over top of G Lydian, right? So F sharp Phrygian isn't so useless, you know? It's pretty cool. If you look at F sharp Lydian, F sharp Phrygian, right, which I would never play anything out of F sharp Phrygian, but in a way I kind of always am if I'm playing over, I had to dash off to an appointment. All right, so yeah, check, there isn't much left here. I'm gonna go upstairs and take care of some essentials. Is there an argument for saying, screw it, I'll just play D major? No, do not do that. The thing that you wanna do is make sure that you realize you're playing the fingerings of the notes that are included within all of the modes of D major, but you have to think about how you stick the landing. You have to think about the dismount, okay? So right now we're just doing somersaults and everything like that, but it's meaningless unless we go boink and we land it appropriately, okay? We need to actually, in our floor exercise analogy here, we need to land on the 1, 3, and 5, maybe the flat 7 of the sound that we're going for. Okay, here it's A Mixolydian. So we want to end on these. First of all, let's talk about the hierarchy of notes, right? We've got 12 sounds. The guitar makes 12. Okay, that's it. And you can bend and fudge a little bit, right? But let's think about it as 12 discrete sounds, and they have various levels of consonance and dissonance. Okay, that is to say, feeling of need to move or ability to stay, right? This can stay put, right? But this, that needs to move. It has to move quickly. It can't stay there long, all right? There are no wrong notes. There's just too long of a time spent on that note. Right? That note isn't wrong. I use that note all the time when I'm playing in A Mixolydian. Watch. I just used it. But how long did I stay on there, okay? That music is the blues guys. Yeah, blues guys are fucked when it comes to learning how to do Grateful Dead stuff because they grew up playing over A major to G chords and going. Yeah, so that's the hard part, is definitely resolving, okay? So what we want to do is realize where we are. So let's look at, I appreciate all the comments, everybody, but allow me just a moment to try to complete the idea here. Let's say there's 12 notes that we can play. And there are no right or wrong. There's only duration that we're really concerned about, okay? And we're also concerned about the placement of it. Is it at the moment of the need to complete, right? We have a framework. 1, to another chord, back to that sound, to another sound, okay? So we want to hear bam, bam, ba, da, 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 da. So we want to hear. Right, and we can mess around with the duration, okay, of even the sourest of notes. That note, you think it's a bad note, right? No, it's not a bad note. It's a bad hold note, okay? You can't hold that tone. That tone has immense amounts of power, okay? In the chessboard analogy of the functionality of all those different pieces, some have the ability to stay put better than others, the 1, 3, and 5 primarily. Okay, they can just, but if we only played those notes, there would be no spice in our sauce. It would just be, what's the point? I would just be arpeggiating. Way to start soloing, by the way. You're playing all safe chord tones. Great. Now let's think about an approach tone. Right? Now we're going to mess with duration of these tension notes. Notes there really add the tension. So what are we doing? We're actually kind of creating a problem that we know we can solve. We're going to say tension, release, tension, release, tension, release. Tension, release. Tension, release. Tension, release. We're actually starting a fire and putting it out and being like, look at me, I saved you. But in reality, what are we doing? We're actually causing the problem and fixing it right back to back to back, over and over and over again. That's what's happening. Tension, release, tension, release. So get into realizing that you've got hold tones. Okay, and those are the easy ones to find. They sound great. And it doesn't matter which order you go in. Right? A safe tone is a safe tone no matter where it is on the neck. However, sometimes thirds down low sound a little less pleasing. Okay? So that's the first order of business, is like chord tones or hold tones or safe tones, right? I think about those as being like standing on one of the 4 bases, right? You're safe if you're on base, right, in baseball. Then we have the connective tissue between those notes. Let's say we've got our first note and our third note. That's our 1, 3, and 5. There's notes in between. We've got the 1, 2 before we get to the 3. Let's hit the 2, okay, and see what happens see what it sounds like over the first chord. It doesn't sound bad, but it doesn't sound resolved. It doesn't sound like a hold tone. We can hold it, but to an effect. It causes an effect. Let's look at other notes. Let's hold the 4 over top of the 1 chord. Sounds good over the second chord. Maybe sounds good over the third chord, but not as good over that first chord. That sounds nice, but not over there. Okay, so better over the second, but not bad. It doesn't sound like this. Okay, but So now we've got a chord tone, a scale tone, and a tension tone. This tone is generally seen as an avoid tone as far as duration is concerned. We can use it to gliss into notes for great effect, right? Right, we can create that. Sounds really good. That's the flat 5 being implemented to cause tension and release. Okay, so now we have chord tones and whole tones, okay? Then we have scale tones, which connect them, and those are safe, but don't always sound as powerful or as resolved as those tones. And then we have these outlier notes, these kind of, whole notes that we can use to gliss into any of those. So we can actually gliss into a chord tone. Right, we can gliss in. We're still hearing that note. Okay, spice notes. That's not a bad way to think about it. Absolutely, sir. So we could think about it as those are the notes that we sprinkle on the top that make it a little kinky, okay? Otherwise, it's like, I am a pilgrim, and this is how we do it, right? It's very, we don't want it to sound all square, right? So by adding those little glisses and things like that in there, it's all about duration. How long can you get away with it for, okay? How long can you add that tension? So watch, this note here typically would be like a third rail. Awful, but watch. I just used it to great effect, in my opinion. So I bent from the flat 2 up into the 9, okay? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I bent from there into there. Over top of that one moment where we go down into G, and that went from the wrongest note on earth, which isn't a word, but the most incorrect note you could have chosen, into the third of the G chord, and that made it sound really delicious. That made it great sounding. So over top of this, bad, but watch. So went from being the most tense you could be over the 1 chord to one of the more resolved sounds over top of the G chord. And that's how using these chromatics causes that spicy sensation of tension and release, tension and release. If all we do is play inside, it starts to sound really lame, really fast. Okay, so somebody mentioned that coming at this kind of music from a blues rock perspective is particularly challenging. And I agree with you on that. That one of the main things you want to do is develop the ideas of, this is to circle back to basic practicing strategies for how to acquire this musical vocabulary. One is to realize your modes, your major scale, your pentatonics, and your arpeggio shapes, okay? So looking at all those, if we look at the arpeggio of this, then that's our 2 chord, right? And then, what was it? The 4 chord, 5 chord would be, right, that kind of sound. That's the 6 chord, the 7. And then finally, that's the modes of D major done in kind of, four tone arpeggios. 1, 3, 5 flats. Oh, major 7. So 5 notes arpeggios. Right? Right? So once you have those together, you struggle so much with that. Yeah. So what we'll do is we'll get to this in a second. Once you get that together, you have to really look at what's going on over top of the types of chords. So stop thinking about this as the Ionian mode and the Dorian mode. You start thinking about the fact that any chord, right? When you're thinking about the if we're playing over a progression, you have to think about playing which kind of major scale are we playing, because we've got a D major chord, a G major chord, and an A major chord in D major, right? So you notice that we were talking about playing the Mixolydian mode over the 5, okay? Well, that's still a major scale. It has a root and a major third. It's the upper extensions that differentiate it from the major scale, which is why we say the Mixolydian is A major with a flat 7. Okay, so it's basically a major scale with just this one little tweak. Let's look at the G major chord. It has a G and a B. That's just 1, 3, and 5. Okay, where does it differentiate from, okay, the typical major scale would be 1, 2, 3, no 4, raised 4. And look at that. That's the third of the A, or the the major 7 of the D, from which it springs. So still thinking D major notes. So we're playing the D major notes from G to G. Right? Bad note, good note, good note. Right? Thinking about it in those terms really helped me a lot to realize that we've got one major scale we call Ionian, another major scale that we call Lydian, and another major scale over the 5th degree that we call Mixolydian. Okay? But what's really hip, oh yeah, I love that strat too, man. This thing is my baby. So the other thing to realize is that, funny enough, the D major pentatonic works over the D chord. The G major pentatonic works over the G Lydian sound, and A major pentatonic works over all of its modes. So regardless of which chord you're playing over, you're safe playing that particular major chord's major pentatonic, which is another reason why I start my students playing major pentatonics over major chords and minor pentatonics over minor chords, because it might not be the most complete and most correct response, but there's no invalid or shitty information in those notes. It's kind of an all mackerel are fish, but not all fish are mackerel, right? It's not the most complete answer, but there's no wrong notes in there. So we could play that over any kind of D major chord, and those notes are all good. It isn't a complete picture. It's still, if we were playing a D7, we would still need to augment and include the flat 7, and and add the 4, right? And now all of a sudden we took a 5-note scale, added 2, and now it's diatonic and it's D Mixolydian. If we look at it as, oh shit, I'm playing over top of a D major 7 chord with a sharp 4, then I have to think, oh, I'm gonna need to add that A flat, or G sharp rather, and a C sharp, and now I'm playing Lydian. And if I'm playing just with a natural 4th and a perfect 4th and a major 7, so it's just the 4 and the 7 that get moved around, right? Then I turn into the do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, which we come to call the major scale, even though there are 3 major scales within the key of D major, right? So we've got the 1, 4, and 5, and lo and behold, what are we playing in Franklin's? 5, 4, 1, right? Everybody thinks that song's in A Mixolydian, and yeah, it kind of is, because that's where we begin and end. But all of the chords actually stem from the parent scale of, right? They're all built out of the D major scale, so in effect, it's in D major. So as long as we end on the 1, 3, and 5 of the A, and the 1, 3, 5 of the G, or when we're playing over the G chord, and the 1, 3, 5 of the D, then we're fine. Okay, it's D major, it's G Lydian, it's E minor Dorian, it's B minor Aeolian, it's all of the modes of D major stretched out across the board and punctuated according to the bass tone that's underneath it. That's the way to incorporate it. I'm going to keep saying it over and over again, and ultimately, like a child that's sitting at the table with somebody smarter than it, you will end up learning and through osmosis the mentality of getting around this tricky idea. At first, this seems very bizarre. All right, I understand. It's like, why am I defining it in this from the root, and it's still the same D major scale? It's getting over this hump that there's only one major scale or one minor scale. So if we were to look at playing over top of Franklin's, we could think playing A major pentatonic, G major pentatonic. Start a bad conversation, but I should already. I'm not really. I've never really spent any meaningful time with the Stitch Method guy stuff. I have a great deal of respect for anybody who takes their free time and energy and shares what they know about music to create more knowledge and interest and everything like that. And he's an amazingly successful YouTuber, and so I'm impressed with the ability for him to actually do all that. But hey, Eric, you're welcome, man. I don't like to talk bad about people, but I don't necessarily see the Stitch Method stuff. Yeah, it really does take a lot of energy, and it also requires an openness on the side of the pupil. And the truth is, sometimes talking to me about this stuff can feel like drinking from a fire hose. And there are other online educators that are better than I am at parsing things down into smaller little chunks. And I think that the Stitch guy is super friendly and really accessible. And there's elements about his lessons that I think are probably really attractive to the casual player and stuff like that. I tend to think of my niche as being slightly different than his, and I don't necessarily see us as being, I think that exactly. So I'm not trying to knock anybody. That said, I don't. Just the same way the major pentatonic is not the full and complete answer for how to solo over top of a song like that. I also think that the Stitch Method guy stuff is not. He's not trying to do that. He's actually trying to offer people an entree to it. And so, for all I know, he's an absolute monster behind the scenes and can out-shred me. And his abilities as a player don't necessarily negate his abilities as a teacher. So I have every interest in being positive towards everybody that's out there trying to contribute. That said, there is one thing that bothers me. I don't really like the term mixodorian. I hate that. That just tweaks me in like a serial mom kind of like, you're wearing white pants after Labor Day, young man. That freaks me out. Like, I don't buy that. I don't believe in mixodorian. So to me, that's the Bigfoot of the guitar, internet universe. That's the Bigfoot. All right. It's mixolydian with the flat 3. It's not that big a deal. All right. So yeah, Stitch Method and Michael Palmisano and all those guys, kudos to them for amassing, like, I don't know how anybody does this as successfully as those guys do, so I'm deeply impressed, like wildly impressed. Let's leave it with the positive. Okay, so let's talk about if we're going to continue this idea of understanding arpeggios and then using them, right? See, that's the modal note. That's the Phrygian. That's the Phrygian note over top of our F sharp in D. Right? Because if we're fleshing out, the next note would be that in D major. Okay, so there's our Phrygian. That's our F sharp Phrygian. But what does that sound good over? Look at how it sounds over. I hate Phrygian. I don't like that sound. But imagine playing Phrygian over top of our Dark Star-ish groove. Oh, sorry, I hit a clam there. Right? Sounds really dope. Now it's starting to look more like an A7 arpeggio. Right? That looks like the 6, the flat 7, the root, 3rd, 5th, flat 7 again. So that's why learning all the modes of your thing, of your parent scale is super important, because you can recycle Phrygian against the Mixolydian pretty easily. And you can recycle the Locrian against it. I already showed that's the 7th mode, right? So don't discard those modes that sound like too metal, all right? The metal stuff can actually be brought in pretty nicely against the Mixolydian. All right, so learning your arpeggios, super important. Learning your major and minor pentatonics, super important, because as stated, they're kind of like the stem cell of the musical universe. You know, I couldn't quite get to that comment. So they're kind of like the stem cell. They can be turned into all the other. Would love to have one of these sessions with you where we play together and analyze things you're teaching from the keyboard perspective. Ooh, I've been putting all the dead tunes in C to see how they work. Jake Seligman, I know you. I miss you, brother. All right, that's amazing. I think your teacher who tossed you into the modes world early did good. No, because he actually didn't give me any of this. I love Eric Horn till the day I die. He's my teacher. He is the guy who actually gave me the building blocks for everything I'm doing now in terms of technique and understanding. But in truth, I left more confused than educated when it came to the modes. That said, he took a tremendous amount of time to bring me under his wing and in teaching me what he could. And I'll love him forever for doing that. And I'm saddened to say that he didn't get to end his years playing guitar. He was injured while on his day job and wasn't able to play guitar. And I miss him and I love him, and I'm sad for his, I don't know if he's still around, actually. He probably is. But if you're out there, Eric, man, I love you and I miss you, and I hope you reach out and say, hey, I hope you're doing well. So let's look at other ways of developing skills. Rather than like blowing up the fingerboard and kind of arpeggiating our way up through the modes, sometimes it's better to go back to square one and do the modes over top of a static chord. Let's just go D, 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 okay? Oh shit, I didn't do the loop right. D, 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 D. Now I can hear D major against D. D major. Now let's hear it against D minor with a Dorian sixth. Here's D dominant. All right, D diminished. Now we start to recognize these colors. Aeolian. Right? Now what's Locrian? Rather than getting confused about the purpose behind these different fingerings that we're learning them all relative to a droning D, and we're seeing how, when I hear this sound, right, I'm going to attack it by playing, right, when I hear this sound, I'm going to attack it by playing, that's right. When I hear this sound, I'm gonna, right? So, and when you hear the Phrygian sound, you know, whatever, I don't like that, but. Okay, so that's, right, that. Once again, we talked about how useful that can be when not just for metal, but I do love some metal. All right, so that's a really great way of reversing the way modes are taught that my teacher did not teach me. And that is how I try to teach it, is against a static chord, what are we doing? We're learning major. Yes. I agree with you, Christopher. So D major, this is a great way of learning the sounds of changing modes though, is taking, right, this, and then changing your major chord to a minor chord. Then to a dominant sound. And then to a diminished sound. Back and forth between different, and changing it around and learning to recognize, kind of like the way you recognize the flavor of garlic different from onions. Like those two things are very distinct on our palate, but we should learn how to do the same thing with the difference between the Aeolian and the Dorian. Or is it harmonic minor? Or is it, what are we hearing? What is that weird sound? And associating the scale and the arpeggio sounding like, oh, Esther. I don't know Esther, but it sounds reasonable. I think Trey is brilliant and very studious. He's a super cerebral cat, and at the same time able to let go of everything he learned and take off in a way that is amazing. To watch that man blast off in the mid through late 90s was absolutely incredible, and I missed it. I've only seen it recorded. I was a stuck-up snob and I couldn't get into Fish because I thought it was just too fucking goofy. And I still kind of do, but man, I missed some good things. I could have been seeing Fish an awful lot. I was all up in the wetlands thing and didn't go and deal with that. And I could have seen a lot of that when they came to town, and I could have seen that band when they were babies and actually really gotten on board early. So some regrets for sure. That said, you know, the more cerebral and heady side of this is good at first, but we want to move past that to the point where we learn to paint with those colors, okay? Sonically speaking, we want to learn how to... All right, all right, Jake. You've always been my bossy younger brother. So the ideas that I'm talking about is about acquiring a familiarity with and ear training towards these sounds, so that when we hear this sound, we think there's only two options of what to play over that: Ionian or Lydian. That's it. There isn't enough information in there to give a complete answer, and that baffles people because there's no statement about if we heard this chord, then we would know it was Lydian. But because we have a perfect fifth and no fourth stated, it could be major 7 add 9, or it could be the Lydian sound. Right? Right? So that's an interesting chord. Similarly, if we hear a minor 7 chord, that could be 3 different sounds. That could be over the minor 7, it could be a Phrygian, it could be... So if we hear... That's Aeolian, and if we hear... Now all of a sudden we're hearing... We can play Dorian over minor 7, or we can play any of those things. But if we hear a minor 6 chord, then we know it's Dorian, okay? Eyes of the World territory for E major 7. Let's... Fine, yes, but it's not really the 4 chord of the B. Though. I mean, because that's a tough song to talk about it like that. Okay, so in a way,
in an isolated sense, it would be in fact the Lydian chord of B major. Yes, okay, but in that song, in context, the B minor is present, so it's confusing, I think, to the casual reader what you were getting at, Christopher. So while I agree that in kind of in a static world where we're talking about B major as the 1, and then seeing the 2, and then the 3. Sorry, that would actually be that, the Phrygian 3rd, and then we would have a Lydian 4th. Yeah, but I don't really think about. But see, that's the problem. Is it is in and of itself used in Eyes as the one of the 2 tonal centers in the song. So the thing about Eyes is difficult to understand is that there isn't one pervasive mode that kind of encapsulates the entire jam. We start in E major, then we migrate to A major and start on its 2 chord. Yes, exactly. So, Jacob, you are now confirming what I just stated, and so we're starting here on the E, then B Dorian as the 2 of A, and then A, right? So we've got that A major sound, right? Because it's so really what we're doing is going E, B, A. We got this little chromatic beep beep burp. Very fun. Yeah, of course. Okay, fine. So sure, if you want to think about isolated from the, I'm sorry, I didn't have time to read the question. Yes, you are correct. In an isolated sense, the major 7 chord is, it can be either the 1 or the 4 chord, depending on what information you have pertaining to it. So this could be B major's 4 chord, but it also could be the E major's 1 chord. Bro, come to Portchester and jam with me in my garage. And let's go to Phil. I think that's probably from Jacob again. Let's see. I mean, Jacob, you and I have spent 1,000 hours together with this stuff. Let's go see Phil. Maybe I will. Maybe I should do that. Maybe I should take you up on that. So that's kind of an overview of how to acquire some of this knowledge. Is I start with the major pentatonic and then the modes of the major scale, and then kind of pepper the pentatonic major sound that's at the core of most of the singing. Most singing doesn't take place within the modes, right? So let's look at a tune like, let's do something that's easy to hear the melody to. It's 1, 2, 3. Maybe you wanna do the beat, this is sweet. Only for a night or a beat. But a taste of love is worse than none at all. Thing together. Okay, so having a little loop of that kind of thing together, you can really start to see what Garcia's vocal push is. It's always major 6, flat 3. And then using the flat 3 up into the 3rd of the vocal melody. 3, 4. we can play these melodies out of these major pentatonics with slight chromatic alterations, like that, flat third. All right, and then over top of the right. So once you learn that major pentatonic sweet vocal style, then start peppering it in with some of the modal information. And then you've got the basis of the nice to see you on a Sunday morning. Yeah, it's super nice to be here. You know, taking my time. The idea of acquiring that discipline of playing the major pentatonic, fleshing it out with more modal information, arpeggios. Scales can come in handy, you know, they can come in handy, but they can also become a bit of a trap in terms of, you know, thinking about things in terms of playing like, and just kind of buzzing through, you know, fours or something like that, and thinking I'm sounding like Garcia because you're playing 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4. Yeah, there's a couple of instances in the Dead's playing where that's like relied upon, but by and large, it's melodies. It's a lot of melodies. You know, there's not a lot of over top of like Iko Iko or something like that. Meanwhile, there's a shit ton of melodies, and the ability to understand that you're playing out of one chord over one mode of one chord over that thing and another out of the other, and realizing how to commingle those two sounds. That's really where the stew starts to get rich, as opposed to a tune like Brown-Eyed Women, where it's all the chords are diatonic to E major, and so you're playing, you know, this kind of. These are all diatonic to E major. So really all I have to worry about is playing E major over top of them and making sure that when you land on the B chord, you're playing the 1, 3, or 5 that. If you feel like a jamming today, then go to see Phil and friends play. I second that emotion. You know, I do feel like jamming, but I don't think I actually have the ability. My wife and kids are coming home shortly, and then I will transform into family man. Which is how I keep all of this energy commingled. You know, a lot of musicians don't get to have a successful family life. I'm particularly blessed in that regard. So the idea of learning how to extend that major pentatonic and minor pentatonic into this more modal approach, super helpful, rather than thinking about things as this gravy approach I talk about, where you're just saying, oh, that song's in D major, ergo I can just go and jerk off in D major all over the place. That never seems to really work, because we miss the opportunity to actually punctuate what chord we're playing over by thinking I'm playing over the A chord, and that's a Mixolydian chord. G chord, I'm playing over a Lydian sound, and I'm heading back to D major. Okay? And oftentimes it makes more sense to actually even skip a chord. Like let's talk about Franklin's for a second. If we're hearing that kind of 3, 4. Let's see if the loop worked. Okay. So yeah, is that A Mixolydian? Yeah. Is that G Lydian? Yes. Is that D major? Yes. Is that E Dorian? Yes. It's all those things. But really, we're looking to resolve things to A and then through G on our way to D. So rather than thinking about A, G, D, G, A, and constantly utilizing that G chord as the buffer between the A and the D chord, skip it all together and skip playing things. I mean, there's the occasional moment where going like that sounds really dope, right? That sounds all like Mixolydian and right? And everybody thinks, oh, that's the sound of Jerry. Kind of ish. Not really. More, the sound of Jerry is the I thinking there? I'm thinking A major pentatonic to D major pentatonic. I am not thinking about that fucking G chord. That G chord is the thing that I think causes the, yes, we did literally jam that forever. And Jake, you, like I said, you were the younger brother who shot me straight and really put me on the road to a lot of this knowledge. So exactly, Christopher, if we look at the G chord as not as a passing tone, but literally as a passing home base, right? To try to give it, we're going A, G, D, 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 G, right? We 3 times the amount of time spent on A, G, and then we go D, 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 G. That's 3-to-1 ratio of A's to G's and D's to G's. Ditch your G's and watch what happens. If you catch a G by mistake, right, that's a cool thing to do. So if we get, okay. Happen to come up and grab that G, all right? But I wasn't really hung up on thinking, playing over A, G, D, G, A, G, D, G. I'm not thinking about tagging that G as a tonal center, because what ends up happening there is, anybody ever bought a 5-liter bottle of olive oil, and you just pull up that thing and then you start pouring the olive oil out, and there's all that pressure and the air at the top of this big canister now, and instead of going flowing out, it goes and it makes a fucking terrible mess all over your kitchen. That right there is what's happening. There's like a funnel with too much information trying to be jammed through this little tiny aperture. All right, so what we need to do is create a little bit more of a flow state and just think A, D. All right, ditch that G and think A,